I check it like you read Sing spelling it, yeah? I really don't mind.
You hit me once, I hit you back.
He's bowling like my Auntie Annie when she'd had too much sherry to drink.
Played over my head, then I set fire.
मैंने कहा बेटा बेटा होता है और बाप बाप होता है.
Hello and welcome to Pie Checkers Cricket Podcast. This is Vivek and I'm joined with my fellow Pie Checkers Sai, Shivam and Sumer. Now, before we go ahead and start the episode, a request from all four of us, those watching and listening to us. A few of you have been kind enough to state that this channel is underrated. The content is great. You guys should have a lot of likes and subscribers. Well, thank you for that. But it's not going to happen if a lot of you who have been watching it don't like, share, subscribe, and comment on our content. If there is anything which you like, please let us know. If you don't like, please let us know. बताओ हमें हम लोग क्या कर सकते हैं और अच्छा. So please do it, because that based on the like, share, subscription is how you gain your visibility, and that's how YouTube algorithm works. So yeah, that's how the life is right now. And with that, now to the main event. Today we have someone with us who was our very first guest on our podcast, and we consider ourselves extremely lucky that he felt we are an okay bunch to come and talk to us the upcoming England tour to India. UK correspondent for ESPNcricinfo, the face of polite inquiries, George Dobell. Welcome to Pie Checkers Cricket Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me back. Very flattered.
And should I have also included in that intro that you had bet a beer and your firstborn on this tour not happening in India?
I did, and I've been wrong, haven't I? Although, what day is it? Yeah, we're not there yet. I'm delighted to be proved wrong as well, because I mean, everywhere they're playing, they're doing a really good job. We sort of saw, when England were in South Africa, we saw how difficult it was actually to maintain the sort of bio bubbles that are required. And to do it, you know, both England and India have experienced COVID quite badly, haven't they? There have been a lot of deaths. And to have some sort of element of normality within that, you know, it's a great effort. It really, really is. So I didn't think it would happen, and I applaud everyone for doing it. And also, by the way, the players. You're not hearing a peep of complaint from these guys, but it is rubbish. The lives they're going through at the moment. I know playing international cricket's a brilliant thing to do. It's a great job. But, you know, having had a tiny little experience of what lockdown was like up to a point during the English summer, they are in those hotel rooms for a very, very long time. And there's no release. It's quite difficult. And I really admire the way that they're getting on with it. And you've seen in other sports as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
There's been a bit of moaning in other sports.
Tennis,
you know,
especially tennis.
Tennis in particular, and maybe that's the difference between an individual game and a team game. It's certainly in football and rugby, they've struggled to maintain the sort of bio bubble protocols. And in cricket generally, I think, you know, all around the world, the teams have been really, really good. They've really bought into it. Yeah. And if they hadn't, you know, I don't know what the hell I'd be doing to get through all this, because it's pretty miserable. And two, the economy of cricket would be grinded to a halt. So they deserve a lot of respect for that, even before the series takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are all very glad that cricket is happening. And with that, Judge, the discussion which is happening back after the epic India versus Australia series, that this is one of the best series of all time, at least from an Indian perspective. And there has been discussion going on that this has been one of the best series of all times, maybe in the top 3. Is it better than the 2005 Ashes series?
I don't know. I don't know that we have to choose. Do you know what? I've seen quite a lot of good series which sort of get forgotten about a bit because they're maybe not with such fashionable sides or whatever. I mean, I'll give you an example. The 2015 series between New Zealand and England was crazy fun. 2012 series between England and India was pretty good. And actually, the last one, India in England, I know when you look at the scoreline, it was a lot closer than that, wasn't it? It was a lot closer than that. So I don't know. It was a brilliant series, and it was very unlikely, I thought, anyway. But you know, particularly after the first game. Yeah, fantastic for the game, fantastic for this series. I don't know that it's the best. I don't know that we need to choose, but it's a reminder that cricket's a wonderful game, and that was cricket at its best, really. And when England, well, I don't want to take anything away from England. Generally, when England have won in Australia, it's been a slightly weaker Australia side. That Australian bowling attack is absolutely fantastic. It's terrific. So to beat them, really, really great effort. Nothing but respect.
So still not better than 2005.
Well, I don't know. It's different. 2005. I mean, to be fair, I don't know that I covered a lot of 2005 because I was doing county cricket at the time, and I was watching it on TV, and it was a brilliant series because it was like boxing through the eyes of the Rocky movies. Yeah, it was like two sides just didn't play any defensive shots. They just tried to beat the hell out of each other for 2 months, and so it was extremely entertaining. And of course, England won, which they hadn't done since the dawn of time. So it's more memorable in England. Whether it was better and stuff, I don't know. It did have a lot of good players in it, didn't it? And it had Flintoff at the peak of his powers. So it's very memorable here. I don't know whether it captured the world in the same way. I don't know. But again, you don't have to choose. If you said to me, which is your favourite child, I wouldn't immediately say it's Charlie. Or Olivia or Jack.
Yeah.
So in the lead up to the India-England series, obviously England has spent some time in Sri Lanka and played 2 tests, had their dose of turners to deal with. Do you think that this is arguably the best possible preparation for England ahead of a long tour of India?
I do think that was probably really helpful. Yeah, I do. It's not ideal preparation, If you're preparing for a tour of India, you're asking for more than 3 days in the nets. You're asking for warm-up games. You're asking for, proper preparation time in games against good quality opposition. There's a day-night game around the corner, isn't there? What preparation is there for that? So it's not ideal. And of course, probably 3 of England's top 6 didn't play in that Sri Lanka series. So, actually, is that right? It's 3 or 4 of England's first choice 11 anyway. Let's put it that way. Didn't play in that series. So it's not ideal, but it's not ideal for India either. And we all understand the situation in which we're living. Again, I admire them for not moaning about it, getting on with it. It's not ideal, but you're right. Playing in Sri Lanka will have given some sort of environmental help. I don't expect the pitches to be similar. Do you?
I guess that's the question that we're all looking forward to finding out about next week. Early reports suggest that the curator in Chennai has left a lot of grass on the pitches, but but I assume that he'll shave all that off in the lead up to the test.
Yeah, I was at that game. It was 2016. India batted forever. They might still be batting. What do they score? 700 and something. 710 for 7, something like that. I'll be honest. I don't know if you remember, but
England got 400 plus in two of the last tests.
Yeah, I think England lost by 8 wickets, didn't they? Scored 470 and lost by 8 wickets, I think. So I couldn't get accreditation for that game. I don't know if you remember, but I was not very popular at the BCCI. And I was sitting outside. Do you know the Buckingham Canal at the back of that ground? It's not lovely. It's kind of sewagey. And I was kind of roasting about 20 yards away from the sewage, which was also roasting. And by watching India rack up 700, that wasn't the easiest day or two. But that was really interesting because I don't think India need to do anything to their pitches. That India team is well balanced. It doesn't need to doctor a pitch in any way. So I think the pitches will be pretty much like they were, and they'll be flat, and they will deteriorate a little bit, but it won't be like Gaul. You won't have a spinner opening the bowling in the first innings, I don't think. And I think if they do that, it's a mistake because that's the way you let England in. it's like a rubbish football pitch with really long grass or bumps or on a slope or something. It can be a leveler. If you put these teams in really good conditions, really flat wickets, and you ask England's bowlers to find a way to bowl India out, really, really, really tough. So I think India will prepare good wickets. I know that groundsmen sometimes have their own sort of pride and their own agendas, but when people talk about a lot of grass, it might be a lot of grass by comparison to other Chennai wickets. It won't be a lot of grass in comparison to a Chelmsford wicket, So I think it'll be I think there'll be good cricket wickets, slightly old-fashioned maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't do that, I think it'll be a mistake.
With so many tests this year for England, I think over 15 at last count, and they keep adding more tests with the New Zealand series now added in.
Yeah, it's at least 17. 17.
It's in 17, right? Yeah. And with the IPL, the 100, the T20 World Cup, you have a chock-a-block schedule for the English team, and it looks like
and an Ashes.
And Ashes, of course.
and they decided to squeeze in an extra tour to Pakistan. Because there was so much room for that. And there's a tour to Bangladesh as well. It's incredible how much cricket England play.
So, I mean, I think the realities of modern cricket is that given a dedicated window for the IPL, players have to now be managed through international test series and international matches instead of the IPL. I guess it makes sense in a T20 World Cup year where the T20 World Cup's in India, presumably, that you get as much exposure for your players in the IPL. But what does that say about England, that they're, to an extent, sacrificing these test matches in India so that their players get to be fully fit for the IPL, or they get that rest, which they know they won't be getting during the IPL?
Okay, so I don't think the aim is to ensure that all the players get to the IPL fully fit and rested. That's not the aim.
But it's likely. Please.
But there's an acceptance that the IPL's in the calendar.
Exactly.
And I don't think this is a black and white situation where they're just going to say rest people for international duty and never say, maybe you shouldn't be playing the whole IPL, because I do think that will happen. I don't think players will necessarily. We've already seen it. You've seen it in recent times. Chris Woakes pulled out of the auction, didn't he? Mm-hmm. And I think that, or maybe he even had a contract. I think he did.
Yes,
he pulled out before this.
Yeah. And Ben Stokes obviously was only there for about half of it, wasn't it? Which made a massive difference to the Royals. Obviously for slightly different reasons, but yes, I don't think it's incredible. I wouldn't be staggered if Jofra said, I need 2 weeks off, I'll miss the first 3 games or something. That wouldn't. And I hope that everyone would be understanding about that. In terms of resting people for such an iconic series as the India one, and the India one is a big series, I don't know how many first choice players they're resting. Johnny Bairstow looked good in Sri Lanka, but he probably wouldn't have played in Sri Lanka if everyone had been available. Now, would he have got into the side in India? He would have been there or thereabouts, but he's not guaranteed. And at the time they made the decision, it was a long way from guaranteed. And actually the same with Joss. Now, I wouldn't have picked Joss for Sri Lanka. Now, again, I got it wrong. He both batted well, which is not a huge surprise at all, but he kept very well. And he's never kept better, and he did really well. So he probably would have kept his place in India. But Ben Foakes is terrific. Ben Foakes averages more with the bat, I think, in every format, doesn't he? Maybe not in T20 actually, but he was player of the match in his ODI debut. I think he was player of the match on his Test series debut. Player of the series. He's done very, very well. I don't see England being a lot weaker with him in the side instead of Joss. So I wouldn't overplay how much they're resting. But yeah, there's an acceptance of a couple of things. One, World T20 in India in a few months. It must be helpful to gain more experience against the best players in the world in those conditions. Got to be, hasn't it? Just stands to reason. And at the same time, the financial reality of the situation is that these guys earn huge amounts of money for a relatively short time in the IPL. You could stop them, you could try and stop them, and you would have a clash. So what they've decided to do is embrace the positives and turn a wee bit of a blind eye to the negatives. I think in the world in which we live, that's an intelligent, mature way of dealing with it. Having said that, I think the IPL shouldn't overplay its hand. I don't think, when people talk 2 seasons within 6 or 7 months, we're in unique circumstances. That's unfortunate. If they did that every year, we'd have an issue, I think. I think then there would be a clash. So I think it's important that, no one should overplay their hand. And yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? I think they're taking a fairly mature attitude to it these days.
I think it's, you have to. You don't want a situation where with the West Indies, where players and the board are both, not on the same page, and it leads to the so-called T20 mercenaries. So I think England is obviously a long way away from that, but it's obviously a step in the right direction if you are open to the fact that your players are keen on playing in the IPL. And for all intents and purposes, it does seem like they've reaped some benefits as well, the England cricket team, at least in the limited oversight. Yeah, I
think so. I mean, even when just one thing there, I think the West Indies now have got a much more open-minded attitude towards franchise cricket generally. So the West Indies attitude has changed since they've had a new people in charge, since Dave Cameron left, basically. I think that going right back to England winning the World T20 in 2010, when Paul Collingwood was captain, I think he and KP were the only ones who had been at the IPL, and they were very keen to pick Ryan Sidebottom. Now, at the time, that was quite controversial because he replaced Jimmy Anderson. Jimmy Anderson was grumpy. I mean, he wanted to play, which of course he did.
He's always grumpy from our perspective.
He can't. Well,
That's not fair.
He's bowled more than anyone in Test history as a fast bowler, hasn't he? It's hard. It's hard. So yeah, he was grumpy, and it was a big decision, and that was because of Collingwood's experience of facing left armers in the IPL and just realising that it seemed to be more awkward, and I think their economy rate was better. So then, in the first 7 or 8 balls of the of Sidebottom, first 7 or 8 balls in the final, I reckon he's taken 2 Australian wickets. He's played a big part in England winning, and the IPL was definitely a player in that. It made a difference. So it could be frustrating at times, if there might be a moment where England miss Jos Buttler, but it's not just the IPL. There's too much cricket. And it's all very well that saying England could come first. And I think you guys got in touch because I wrote this piece the other day about the IPL. And I did get, the nature of Twitter. You could say good morning and someone somewhere will abuse you. But there was quite a lot of, England must come first. And I get that, international duty is important. But it's not the IPL on its own that is diluting the importance of international cricket. If there's too much of anything, it starts to feel a wee bit less special. I like chocolate, but I don't want to have a bath in it. And at the moment, England play international cricket all the time. It's almost relentless. Have a look at their schedule, as you said, 17 tests, 18 if they get to the final, which they probably won't, of the World Test Championship, but it could happen. And the World T20, which is T20 World Cup, as it's now called, and all those things. And actually, the India series and the Australia series are probably the 2 biggest now, certainly the 2 biggest in terms of revenue. To play those in the same year, we ask an awful lot of the players. And again, I've got nothing but respect for them, for the ECB at last understanding that people have to be rested and doing it preemptively. Because I think that what you don't want is people going a bit mad inside the bubble, the pressures, the stresses, and also their family situation. You don't want people in situations where their marriages might suffer, or they're not being a good parent, and all these sorts of things. So I think they've got that right. I still think they play too much, but at least they are doing something to care for their players a little bit more, and I think that's healthy.
Turning our eyes towards this series and in the context of the World Test Championship, do you think that England is still focused on that outside remote chance that they could get into the World Test Championship final? Or is that almost a foregone conclusion that they're out of it?
They need snookers, don't they? It's a long shot. I don't think they're particularly focused on it at this stage. No, I think they'll focus on every day, and if they get themselves into a position where it's possible 2 tests in or something, if they're 2-0 up, it's a big if. Then it might start to come into focus. But it's not even just up to them, is it? I think they need results elsewhere to go their away as well. It's a huge ask. It doesn't feel. It's not. It was never designed for probably people like us, to be fair, because I guess that we're the people who like cricket already, and we're pretty into Test cricket, and so it's not really caught the imagination, I don't think, and I also think it's too complex. Yeah. So I don't know that we particularly need it. For what it's worth, if I were gonna try and change things in Test cricket, I'd have promotion and relegation, but I think we're a long way from sides being brave enough to sign up for that, because that way you've got interest almost wherever you are in the cycle. You've got interest at the top and the bottom of the table, right. And peril focuses the mind terrifically. I don't know if you guys support football sides, but there can be just as much drama at the bottom as the top. And actually, in English cricket, in the Championship, we had promotion. We've got rid of it, effectively, anyway. And I think it's been really, really successful. It's been entertaining. It's meant there's something on every game. And there was no downside, really. Yeah, sure, you got demoted, dents your pride. It didn't make any difference financially. And it's all about finance. So I would love them to do something like that, but I don't see any side of it on the horizon.
And given the return of Stokes, that's obviously the big name coming back into the English side. How does that change the balance when we look at the first test? How does it change the balance of that England side compared to the side which played in Sri Lanka? Are we looking at a combination that will be 4 bowlers plus Stokes or 5 bowlers plus Stokes? What can we expect in the first test, at least?
Well, I think they'll play 2 spinners. I mean, I might be wrong. Look, all these things are very hard to say. If you were on tour, you would go to training every day. You would look at the pitch beforehand, hopefully anyway, and you would make some sort of informed guess, I guess. Or you might even be told, at the moment, I'm a million miles away, watching it snow outside my window. I'm guessing, really. The England team are still in their hotel quarantine. I think Stokes was allowed out today, actually, but that little group was allowed out today. So Stokes comes in for Curran, doesn't he, as the all-rounder, but I think he'll bat at 5. Okay, so I think that Root will be at 4, and I think they'll play all 3 openers, Burns, Sibley, and Crawley at 3. I might be wrong. And the reason for that is that though people say, they'll be difficult to start against spin, I think they have to start against seam, and India's seam attack, even without Shami, is very, very good. And I think Ishant Sharma is going to be a real problem for Rory Burns, you would think. So anyway, it's such a well-balanced attack. I think England can't be too funky in their selections, and I think that I think that hopefully Pope would come in then at 6 if he's recovered. It was looking positive, and then Joss Buttler at 7, I guess, for the first test, and then Ben Foakes onwards. And then you've got a choice with the seamers. I think Jofra will play the first one. I think it will either be Stuart Broad or Jimmy Anderson. Don't think it will be both. And then you've got Jack Leach will play, and then you've got a choice between Moeen or Dom Bess for the spinners role. And again, I'd be guessing, Dom Bess's figures were pretty good. He was a bit flattered by his figures in Sri Lanka, but and he batted decently in the second test as well. So I think that's what it will look like. But there's a lot of ifs and buts there because we don't actually know how Ollie Pope is.
No.
But Stokes and Archer play, don't they? They come back in and they play. They make any team better.
No, but you mentioned Stokes and Archer play, George. I mean, they're barely out today. I think all 3 of them, Stokes, Archer, and Burns, from their isolation and quarantine. So what they have is like 4 days to prepare for a test match.
I think those guys have got 5.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah, look, so it's not ideal.
It's not ideal. What I'm saying is that they did not even go to Sri Lanka. They've not played a game for a long time. And we saw how long, I mean, it took at least 3 or 4 matches for Stokes, even in the IPL, a T20 format, to get back into some kind of a rhythm. So do you think both Stokes and Archer will be good to go for a test match straight
I think
away?
it's a really good question. And you would be a little bit worried about bowling them too long. So it might be that they're cautious. And again, it's very hard to give you an informed answer without seeing how they're going in the nets. But what you would hope and what you would think is that they have been given a training plan before the tour. And you would expect both of them as, very good professionals to hit the ground running today. Now, Stokes going into the IPL was a bit different. He hadn't been able to train. Obviously, he had a lot of stuff going on with his family. None of my business really, but you can understand why he might have struggled to train. This time, I'd expect him to be pretty fit and very competitive. And even if he's not at his best with the ball, he is one of England's best batsmen. I mean, I would have said before the Sri Lanka tour that he was England's best batsman. Obviously, Joe Root had a terrific tour and looks back to something approaching his best. But Stokes gets in as a batsman who bowls. So you could change things around, You could play.
Coming to that, I mean, changing things around. You said Broad and Anderson, you don't see them playing together. I mean, how good has Jimmy Anderson in Asia been, right? I mean, everybody says Jimmy is good in England conditions, but Jimmy in Asia, and if you add the 2 test matches of Sri Lanka and select both Jimmy and Broad from the respective test matches that they played, and they played together, I mean, those test matches are not even lasting 2 days then. Why not Jimmy and Broad together?
Well, it could happen, but because they've got effectively 6 tests in 7 or 8 weeks, and now 4 almost back to back, I think they're just going to try and look after them a bit. But it could happen, particularly if Jofra's not at his best. And the role that they're asking those guys to do is probably to bowl extremely dry, bowl really, really tight. And while that's really good, you also need someone at the other end to probably do something different, which is where someone like Mark Wood or Jofra could perhaps play a role. But you're right, it could happen. I mean, nice to hear you acknowledge Jimmy Anderson's record.
I am a huge fan. We all are, in fact. I mean, we hate him because he does so well.
Definitely
people who know what they're talking about aren't there? I mean, the thing is that these debates become so pathetically nationalistic. And you can say that Jimmy Anderson is a terrific bowler, a great cricketer. And it doesn't mean that Malcolm Marshall isn't or something. You know what I mean? You can have uninhibited amount of respect for lots of people. And I think Jimmy Anderson brought his bowling average in Asia down to 29.
Yes.
I think it's higher in India. I was on that 2012 tour where Dhoni said he was the difference between the sides.
He's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Without a fifer, though, I mean, I get that people.
He could reverse it.
And he hit the pitch quite hard still then. Look, he's a different bowler. I mean, one of the things that I don't think he gets the credit for is the heart. Because I've seen him play several times, not least actually on the last tour of India, when he wasn't at his best. So go back to how that tour. He had I think he'd had shoulder surgery. I think that was the injury then. And he was basically going to miss the whole thing. And he kept on putting videos of himself bowling on the internet. And he was desperate to get back out there. He was desperate to play. And he's Jimmy Anderson. So, he's hard to leave out. A man who had any interest in protecting their figures, a man who was selfish, a man who was interested in statistics at all, he would have missed that tour. He would have hidden that away from that tour. And he could have got away with it easy. And he is, one, he loves it. He's a proper cricket geek badger, proper mad for it. And 2, he's hugely competitive and always thinks he's going to win, which is probably a quality that you see in all international sports people. All of the best think they're very good. You probably have to have that bit of dog in you. So I've got nothing but respect for that. And I'll give you another example. He got hit for a record 28 in an over by George Bailey at Perth.
Yeah, in Australia.
He was murdered. And at the time it happened, Stuart Broad was off the pitch. He'd had some sort of injury. He was wearing a moon boot at the time. He was on crutches. It didn't turn out not to be awful, but he'd taken a blow and he couldn't bowl. It was Swan's last game. I reckon his last over went for 20 odd, maybe 24. And his elbow, wasn't it? His elbow had gone. He was knackered. It was Perth, yeah? It's 1,000 degrees. It's hotter than the sun. And Jimmy Anderson's taken the new ball. They've got no one else to bowl. So he's come off for a bit. I can't remember who else was bowling. They weren't doing a terrific job. So they've thrown the ball back at Anderson, who at this stage has bowled about God knows how many overs. He's bowled a lot of overs. The ball's doing nothing. England are screwed. They're about to lose the Ashes again. It's 40 degrees. The Australian supporters, they're pretty good at getting their opinions across of what they think of the British people anyway, let alone when they're just about to go 3-0 down in the Ashes. And yet he still was the one that England turned to. And he got absolutely mullered for it and becomes a bit of Anderson's no good. He went for 28 and an over or whatever. Such a competitor. Is he the best bowler any of us have ever seen? Probably not. No. Is he as good as Dale Steyn? Probably not. But he's still doing it at 38. He's still doing it on wickets giving him nothing. And Gaul, on a flat wicket, obviously Sri Lanka batted poorly. Of course they did. You've got to acknowledge that. But he was terrific. Honestly, when people don't appreciate how good he is, for example, but it's not just him, you wonder if I think cricket maybe isn't their game.
I
Don't
personally
understand it.
feel people hate him more because he does so well against their home teams in English conditions. That may be a reason.
Maybe. I mean, look, he's had some disappointing tours. 16 being one. The other thing, I think, the 2014 summer in England, I think that was a real changing point in his career. I think that whatever happened with Jadeja, I think it probably gave him a bit of a shock. He's always going to have this reputation for being a very grumpy man. Bit of truth in it. But he's been a lot less grumpy since then. There's a lot less this to other players, miles less. And he has been, certainly no worse for it. Look, I thought England were quite hard to love at that time, 13-14. They've been a very good side and they played hard cricket, but they seem to have sort of aped the Australian way of playing, which was, obviously Australia nearly always very, very good. And quite often not that attractive. Brilliant, but hard in a way that New Zealand come along, 2015 in particular, the World Cup, and they play hard as hell, and yet they're likeable. They were extremely generous, spirited opponents, and they showed you could be a really, really fantastic cricketer without being a dick, in short. And I think that England saw that and thought, there's quite a lot to admire there. And actually English cricket saw it and thought, the game in England was going down a cul-de-sac that wasn't particularly pretty. A really great team was falling apart. They didn't seem to like each other anymore, and they weren't playing that nicely. They were tougher to love. And a combination of things, not least McCullum happened. Moeen came into the side a bit before that, but his influence starts to show. And they have become a much nicer side to report on under Joe Root and all these people. I don't know if that's been noticeable from the outside. Is that it? Would you guys have acknowledged that a little bit?
Not unless we're winning in England, probably. We need to win in England.
Well, decent opportunity. I thought last time was an opportunity in a lifetime, but I think the opportunity comes back.
Yeah, Sam Curran did us in.
Well, to be fair, you had a bit of bad luck with the toss at Lord's, didn't you?
Yeah.
That too as well.
I wasn't at that game. I was at the Ben Stokes trial during that game. But I was keeping an eye on it, and it did seem that, the ball did a lot. And I think most teams would have struggled.
Yeah. So then coming back to the current tour, and of course we've discussed a bit about the fast bowling. It would be very unfair if we don't talk a little more about spinners. I mean, you did address that earlier on, but we as Indian, cricket enthusiasts, maybe have a little higher standards for spinners. Yeah. Let's be honest. I mean, we as a group, a lot of us don't think, for example, Jack Leach and Dom Bess are as good as Swan was, for example, in India, right? It's probably not going to be.
Dom Bess's mum doesn't think he's as good as Swan is.
Now, having said that, you do have good thoughts about him, also because he bats a bit as well. But coming back to his spinning, prowess. So talk us a little about, are there any specific plans? What happened in Sri Lanka, of course, as you said already, was a bit more of a self-destruction as well. It's probably not going to happen again in India. So
no, probably not. Probably not. Look, I think he in particular will have come on for the bowl. So those guys went into the tour having not bowled. He hadn't played a game since August. And Leach had played 2 or 3 times since November previous, yeah? And since then he's been in hospital, there's all sorts of things. So, we've got to cut them a wee bit of slack. They're a bit better than that. The 5 in the first test that Bess took, genuinely, don't mean to be unkind, the softest first innings 5 I've ever seen. Okay. I couldn't believe how badly they batted. It was club cricket, wasn't it? It was. Remember the long hop that was it Dick Weller smashed backward point? Yeah. I mean, we didn't even smash it; he sliced it. Dom Bess got a bit lucky there. No doubt, he got lucky there. No doubt about it. I thought he bowled. He took a 4 in the second test in the second innings. I thought he bowled quite nicely. Bowled all right. You're right. In India's batsmen are watching. Virat is not watching that. He's not trembling with fear, is he? So you have to acknowledge that England's spin bowling resources have never been lower. Okay, English cricket is in a terrible mess with spin bowling, and that's a lot because of the domestic structure of England, where they play too much of the season now in early summer and late summer, where seam bowlers get far too much assistance. There's too much grass on the pitch. Yeah. Spinners hardly get a bowl. They really hardly get a bowl. They're almost irrelevant. So those that want to bowl spin pretty much have to learn the white ball skills.
Right.
Which are very, very, very different.
Right.
So there are, I genuinely believe, some talented young spinners in England, but they're just not getting an opportunity to express those skills. If Monty Panesar was coming into the game today, I think he'd really, really struggle. I suspect he wouldn't make it. And how ridiculous is that? So why they've ended up with 2 spinners who were at the same county in Bess and Leach, because Somerset prepared turning tracks to help them, and they also have a batsman who's very good, or a couple of batsmen who are very good at playing spin bowling. So they got some bowling there. They caught the eye, and also they were almost the last men standing because there was hardly any other. There really aren't that many options. Bess was invited to training with the England squad. And he really impressed Trevor Bayliss with his fielding.
Yeah.
Threw himself around at backward point. And, Trevor Bayliss was like, he's a bit of a character. Who's this fella? It's like, well, he played a bit of cricket for Somerset, But because of that, because of his attitude, he got invited again. He kept on making a good impression.
Right.
And although this is not ideal, I kind of get it. Because given how small a part of the game a spinner might play, particularly in a lot of the places where England play, you could understand why they're not going with a specialist who can only contribute in one area in 5 to 10% of the game. They're going with a guy who can contribute so he can field. And he did weigh in with the bat. His innings in that last test in Gaul was very, very important. I think he only got 30 odd. But England were in danger of conceding the first innings lead, a deficit of 100. You lose if you do that. You lose if you do that. And he got it down to 30 odd. So it was a big innings.
Right.
So I see why they do it. But, and also they think he's going to have bad days. If they go to Australia, there will be days which are rough. He's going to have some rough days on this tour. And they're backing him as the sort of a Boolean character who will bounce back and not let it completely destroy him, and they also back him to learn. And that's, I get the logic. He has got a huge amount of learning to do.
Sure.
He's got to improve so much. We are asking him to do an almost impossible job. Is he the best man for it? Well, I get the logic. If Moeen were at his best, Moeen's a better cricketer at his best. I don't know how Moeen is. No one's seen him bowl.
Yeah,
He's been ill. He's had COVID. He's hardly bowled. He'll bowl a bit in the nets. If Moeen is at his very best, he does things with the ball that Dom Bess can't. There are things that worry me about Dom Bess. I don't see him beating batsmen with flight. I do not see his drift getting batsmen into the wrong position. I just don't see it happening. But he did bowl quite well in South Africa against a side that don't play spin particularly well. Asking him to go up against India, it's a huge, huge ask. It's a huge responsibility. It's almost unfair on him, but I get why they're doing it. And they're backing the whole cricketer, and it's reflective of the mess that English cricket is in with spin. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just have a little, thought, which is that, you talked about obviously Bess and Leach will start now, and we're not very confident of how Moeen will bowl. Are you just saying that only if Bess sort of goes for 100 runs in first or second or third test, only then will they think about Moeen, or is just or
No, I don't
do
think
you even
that.
consider Moeen at all?
Well, I think given some of the challenges that England had in Sri Lanka, I think if Moeen is able to play, he'll play, actually. Because I thought that in the second test, in the Sri Lanka's first innings, England's seamers took all the wickets.
Yeah.
Okay. And Bess and Leach were unable to retain control even.
Do much.
So you had a situation where I think Wood, proper strike bowler, bowled more overs than Bess. Can't do that. That can't be happening. You're going to break your bowlers. Anderson bowled more overs than Bess. You can't. He's 38. You don't have an off spinner at Gaul
and don't play him
then
as
ask
much.
your seamers to do all the bowling. Yeah. So Moeen also got 200s on the last India tour. But Moeen's batting since then has declined a lot. But a lot of that, it's up here with Mo. He needs to have more belief in himself. And if he is bowling and batting as we know he can, he's got 180 odd test wickets and 5 test centuries. The guy can play. I would be very, very tempted to pick Moeen and bat him as low as 8. But I can see why Bess has just taken his wickets at 22 or something in Sri Lanka. I can see why they wouldn't. And again, it's very hard to give you an informed view when, Moeen's still in quarantine in his hotel room. They don't know how he's bowling. But no, it's not impossible. There are other spinners on the tour as well, There's a couple of leggies. There are people in reserve there who could play. But I think Moeen and Leach would be arguably the two best. And they could even play 3, couldn't they? They could play 3, but I suspect they won't.
What is the status of Pope's injury? You said he may play, when if he's fit. But we don't know that. Maybe whatever happens with Pope, it's subject to injury. But Dan Lawrence, do you see him playing? There was a lot of build-up. I personally found he played really well in the first test versus Sri Lanka, even against Spain. Why do you want to expose Burns coming back to Ashwin and even Ishant being a left-hander? Why not in the top 3 somewhere, Lawrence? Maybe Root moves up to 3. I don't know. So do you see Lawrence playing in that 11?
Not in an ideal world, I don't. But I don't think he's done himself any harm at all. And there's, he could, and that's okay. Okay, a lot of stuff in there. How little Root has really wanted to bat at 3. He's tried and it hasn't really worked. He's just gone down to number 4 and he's averaged 100, isn't he? Why would you change it? At the same time, Burns is pretty established, now. I know the average isn't particularly awesome, but he's proven himself a good team player in lots of ways. He has played some very good innings. He's decent in the field, and he's not miles away from being talked about as potential sort of captaincy material, He's not miles away. So I think they like Burns, and I get that. In terms of, I know his record isn't brilliant, but if you looked back at his dismissals against Pakistan, they played on quite helpful seam surfaces. And he got some unplayable balls. He really did. I see why they like Burns. If he's fit, I think he plays. And he no reason why he wouldn't be. He only missed that last series for sort of paternity leave. So Burns and Sibley are really interesting. They're kind of ugly to watch, but when they're at their best, they don't nick off to seamers. Okay, they're very, very good outside off stump, which if you're a test opener is a lot of the battle. They're going to be challenged in different ways. People have Sibley looked hideous against spin, but he did play, an innings that went some way towards winning a match. And actually, he's got a very good record. I'm sure Australia will target them with the short ball. I suspect that might be an issue in India because I don't think the pitches will be quite quick enough. I think they present quite an interesting challenge to the Indian seamers. An interesting challenge. I'm just looking forward to watching it. They're very different. When Sibley's playing well, you won't see him nick off very much. Bumrah's going to be a real challenge for both. Well, he'll be a challenge for anyone. But also, by the way, he's coming into this game with a bit of a cloud over him, isn't he? And how many of the 4 tests is he going to play?
Yeah.
So I look, England are the only sides with questions to ask. The one thing that India showed in Australia is the depth of choice, resources is pretty daunting. Look, the difference between the sides, the area where there is a clear difference is in spin bowling.
Right. You talk
if
about
Ashwin were playing for England, if Ashwin were English, not much difference, is there? England could win if Ashwin were. I think they should go for it. They should find a passport somewhere.
Interesting you mentioned Ashwin. But anyway, so I just wanted to touch upon the route angle. Obviously 228, 186 back-to-back tests. And hence it's coming from like a large break. Now, a lot of people thought, including Simon Dool on this very podcast 2 weeks back, that of all the Fab Four, he's probably definitely number 4. Now having done what he did in these last 2 tests, you think he's back? Like, how do you rate him now? Like, would people see him differently? Do you think his good days are back now?
Well, he certainly had a few. Look, you've got to do it. The thing with those other guys that you've mentioned, they've been phenomenally consistent. It's not just about 2 tests, is it? Kane Williamson does it year upon year. Well, all of them do. They're all brilliant. So, no, right now, Root isn't up there. I think he dropped out of the top 10, of the world rankings before that Sri Lanka tour. He definitely has the potential to get back there, and he's just turned 30 recently. Talk is cheap, really. He's got to keep doing it, hasn't he? I do think that we're terribly harsh. When we say, you're brilliant, but you're not. It's like going up to sort of Mick Jagger and saying, yeah, but you weren't in the Beatles. It's just, you could sort of do that with anyone. You could say Jack Callis, yeah, but you weren't Gary Sobers. I don't know. He's having a brilliant career, and I've no doubt that he's compromised a bit of his own success in doing the captaincy. So I think at times England are quite hard to captain, not least because they haven't really got a great spin attack, and that's very, very difficult in the field. He's had all the Ben Stokes stuff to deal with. There's been a lot going on, and he's taken it on himself to deal with it, and I think he's been terrific to deal with for us. I guess that's not how people are rated. It's not how people are judged at the end of their career. But there's quite a lot more to a player than just their statistics and their batting average. England have won 5 overseas tests in a row for the first time in over 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I grew
some
up.
Contribution, of course.
Yeah, I grew up never watching England win abroad. It just didn't happen. Yeah. I mean, look at England's record in the 90s. They've just won 4 series in a row. That hasn't happened since 2005-ish, something like that. So, and he's made them also. How intangibly important this is, I don't know. But he's made them a team that's much easier to like, much easier to deal with, much better role models. That's important in England, you know. Cricket's a niche sport here. It's not like India. You can't have the way the India teams sort of are with the media, which is very hands-off, very little access. It's not like that here. You know, we have.
Yeah, you guys have really high standards with guys asking questions and the tough ones.
Yeah, I mean, and we can do that. So we have a Zoom contact pretty much every day, and we're very grateful for them doing that. But it's largely because of him and his character. So you're asking, you know, none of that means that he deserves to be rated as a better batsman than Virat. Of course not. But I think one thing, the story's not over. Certainly not over as captain. He'll be judged as a captain, rightly or wrongly, with what happens this year. If he wins in India, which, you know, desperately tough. If he wins in India and he wins in Australia at the end of the year, he's a genius. He's a legend, isn't he? If he carries on scoring runs consistently this year, yeah, he can maybe get back up into that sort of ranking. But you could be a very, very good cricketer and not be quite as good at batting as Virat or Kane, you know, or Steve Smith. And, you know, they've all got issues as well. You could make a good case, couldn't you, that Virat shouldn't be captain? You could. But
people are.
You could. Steve Smith, bless him, I think ridiculously, is going to have this sort of stain on his record. I don't think he should. I thought what he did was nothing, personally. Actually, I can't think of anything negative to say about Kane Williamson. He hasn't won a World Cup yet, but I mean, you know, he's had an incredible career, hasn't he? And no blemish on it. But, you know, so yeah, when you say, does Joe deserve to be in that bracket right now? No, he can't. But could he get up there again? Yeah, sure he could. Yeah, he's good enough. Yeah, and probably as an England player, there's talk about him being the best all-format player England have ever had. So I would put him in the top 3 or 4. I think KP might be the best I've seen. Graham Gooch, but he didn't play T20. You know, he is right up there, and he's. By the end of this year, only Alistair Cook will have scored more Test runs for England. I think he's already got the most ODI centuries for England. Say again, he's 30. And I think we ask a bit too much of him as England captain. We ask him to play too much, and he loves playing. And it's probably relevant that he got all those runs in Sri Lanka after a long break. So I hope that he gets to refresh himself more often, and I hope that he's rested. I hope he doesn't play the white ball section of the tour, actually. In India, I'd take him out of it completely. Don't care whether it's T20 or ODIs. I would just rest him, send him home.
Sure. So coming to the team combination, Judge, Butler is going back, and then probably Foakes will replace him. But is that as simple a replacement? Is that going to change the team combination in terms of your having an extra batter or anything of that sort?
I don't see why it should, you know. I mean, Ben Foakes averages more in first-class cricket than Jos Buttler. He averages more in Test cricket than Jos Buttler. And he's a different player. He's a more traditional player. And he is a better keeper than Jos Buttler. So, no, I think that's fine. That's an area where they've got good depth, you know. And Johnny Bairstow could come back in and do a job. I thought he was a bit unlucky to be forgotten as keeper. But, you know, I'd go Ben Foakes, particularly if the ball's going to spin. I think, am I right in saying he'll come in? Yeah, he'll keep in the day-night game. I don't know what that's going to be like. From what we've seen elsewhere, sometimes the seamers do more. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the day-night cricket in lots of ways. I think the ball can go a bit.
Neither are we after that 36 all out.
The only good thing is I won't have to get up. I won't have to get up at 3:30 to watch it. So that's no bad.
You know, when you are looking forward, if we were to pick 2 players from the England side, who would be the biggest threat to India in this series, and then the same exercise from the English side, the 2 biggest Indian threats to them in the series, who would those 4 names be for you?
I could put Punt in both teams there, couldn't I? Because I could say, is he going to keep wicket? If he keeps wicket, who knows what could happen as a bat? He is dangerous person to bowl against, isn't he? I mean, he's an amazing player. That's not a dissimilar debate to the Buttler debate, except for Butler's improved his keeping. But, there are going to be days when India have been in the field when people are like, this can't happen, this can't go on. I mean, Lord, it was only a couple of days before India wrapped up the series that people were moaning about Pujara.
Yeah.
People are harsh. So who's particularly dangerous? Why would you ever look beyond Ben Stokes? I mean, he's obviously a dangerous player, but if England are going to win, you would think they need one of their spinners to do a job. I'd like to see Moeen do well, but that's maybe more. That's maybe slightly more heart than head talking. In terms of who's dangerous, I mean, the India. I think it's going to be really, really tough to take 20 wickets. I mean, I don't. If there's no movement at all, then it's going to be really, really difficult. Having said that, if the ball moves, yeah, it could be really entertaining. Most dangerous, Kohli's hungry. He'll be particularly hungry to score runs against Anderson. I think Bumrah is probably, if I had to pick one fast bowler for a team in the world at the moment, I'd go Jasprit Bumrah. It's so awkward, just so weird what he does, and I don't understand how no one does, do they? You couldn't coach what he does, how he generates that extra pace. And I saw some graphic recently that suggested he was able to sort of hyperextend a bowl from a bit closer to the bat. It's only a few inches, but it would just make a little bit more difference. Whatever it is, he manages to be so consistent with it. He's got good pace, good consistency, fantastic skills. I mean, he is tough to face. So I'm really looking forward to watching him. So I mean, why would you look past Bumrah and probably Kohli? But Pant would be a lot of fun to watch, and I think that there'll be days where he comes in when England are already tired, and it is a bit of a monster. Am I right in thinking Rahane about 5? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you should.
I mean, that is quite a safety net. I mean, you could be 10 for 3 and still end up with 500. So it's a daunting batting lineup, no doubt about it. It's a daunting batting lineup. Did I sense earlier that I maybe rate Ashwin higher than you guys do?
Maybe not.
Yeah.
After his match,
wickets, is he not about to pass 400 Test wickets?
Yes, he is.
Yeah,
I think
Probably during this series, yeah.
The only thing is that we only have, Rory Burns, the left-hander, and maybe Stokes, which is probably number 5, because he's supposedly like a left-handed, a specialist for getting left-handers out. So more left-handers would.
I think the perception of Ashwin has changed a lot with his success overseas now. So if you had asked us this question, maybe pre-Australia tour, we would have had a question. Yeah, he's only good on the ranked turners in India as the response. But now, after what he's done in Australia, it's a bit like Jimmy. It's easy to underestimate him, but when you look at the track record of success, then you realize how special he is.
He's also such a talented batter as well, isn't he? I mean, he could really, really bat. So, he played such a big part in that win as well. He was so brave, wasn't he? Yeah. I'm a big fan. Honestly, England would kill for a spinner like him.
You should actually watch his YouTube videos, the recent 4 or 5 ones that he's done with the coaches post the Australia tour. Those are awesome with subtitles on.
Great insights.
I must tell you, you should watch that.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Yeah,
I don't know whether they'll play Kuldeep. Would Kuldeep
story.
Yeah, Kuldeep. He could, but we don't know, because if India play a bowling all-rounder, spinning all-rounder, then maybe they play 3 spinners. I mean, we have a lot of batting with Pant there, adding a lot of batting. So I think India could play three spinners with 1 spinning all-rounder. Maybe
who's the other?
Axar, and I think Washington Sundar is there. So Axar and Sundar are there. Yeah. So I mean, 3 spinners could very well be a possibility. Depends on the wicket again. I mean, we've been reading the pitch might be green. The curator has said I have to play 2 back-to-back test matches on that square. So you never know. And then there is a pink ball test as well. So you never know.
Yeah,
And
that's true. That's a good
I
point.
mean, you honestly, George, seem a bit skeptical, a bit scared, looking at what India's done in Australia. So I don't think you rate a lot about England's chances. But what is the general expectation of public in UK? I mean, will they be happy with the fight, or do they want England to win? Do they believe England can win?
Oh, I don't think you'd meet anyone who thought England were favourites. I think India are really strong favourites. I think it looks about as tough a tour as there is right now for England, I'd say. In fact, I would. I mean, I can't think of anything tougher. I think what you want to... Yeah, it would be as big an achievement as I would have seen if England won, I think. I mean, the more I look back on 2012, the more it seems like a bit of a miracle. And I might never live through it again, but I definitely think England had more chance of winning in Australia at the end of the year. And we know how rarely they do that. But they've got more chance of doing that because, England actually do have some fast bowlers. I mean, watch out for Mark Wood, yeah? That guy is quick. He is proper quick. So he's quicker than Jofra. He was quickest bowler in the World Cup, wasn't he? He's not. He doesn't have the skills of Jofra. Jofra's the full package. He's got everything. But he is quick. So they sort of have a team that could take on Australia, I think. But this lack of spin bowling we have in England, and because of that, the lack of batsmen who know how to play spin, that is an enduring problem. And I think that will come back to bite them on this tour. So what you're looking for is them to have learned a bit from last time to get huge first innings scores. They're better at that. So they've got to go big, and maybe, prove really, really difficult. I don't know. I sound too defeatist. You see, I haven't got the mentality of a sports person at all. And they won't think like this. They won't be talking like this. They'll be talking about winning. Of course they will. Ben Stokes isn't going to be thinking about going there and nicking a draw. He wouldn't speak that language. And nor will Joe Root. So who knows? Look, sport would be dull if it was predictable. And, Leicester City won the Premiership. I mean, amazing things happen. But it's, it would be it would be an incredible achievement. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it would be an amazing thing for England.
Sure. Definitely.
I'm still not over 2012, so I'm hoping not for I'm hoping we don't have a...
I'm trying to remember. Do you know what went wrong there? So after Ahmedabad, which was a bit of a pasting, I reckon India decided to go for the kill in Mumbai, and they thought, "Oh no, we'll have a turning track. These fellas can't play spin to play to save their lives." But they had two very good innings from Cook and KP. Personally, I think that was the best KP Test century.
Yes.
That's what I saw. He doesn't think so, but it was an amazing innings. But the mistake India really made was they let England into the game by preparing pitches on which their spinners became really dangerous. And actually, Monty bowled at that lovely pace. He bowled a bit quicker than the Indian spinners, didn't he? Was it Oja? It was, wasn't it? Who was?
Yes.
Oja and Harbhajan.
So there were two left-armers in that game, and one of them was kind of placing it, and one of them was bowling, upper 50 miles an hour, whatever that is. And he just it was a perfect wicket for Monty Panesar, that. Shall I tell you a funny story at the end of that tour? I don't know if you remember, in Nagpur, I can't remember who was bowling, Jadeja, I reckon. Jadeja kind of let go of the ball, as sometimes you do, so slipped out of his hand and dribbled down the wicket. Jonathan Trott, you know how normally the batsman pick it up, dead ball, all the rest of it. He was having none of it. He was thinking runs. So he comes down the wicket and smashes it like a hockey shot for four. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And afterwards, you know how cricketers get very sort of po-faced about these things. It's not the done thing, like being run out, back it up. Just keep your bat in your ground, mate. Anyway, afterwards in the presser, Ashwin, who I like now, but at the time he was going, it's not the done thing. It's not the done thing. And I was thinking, can't have this. He kept saying it. Put my hand up. When is a ball so bad that a batsman's not allowed to hit it for four? Was my question. To which he answered, if you don't know that, you'll never know that, or something like that. Just something slightly dismissive. And at the end of the press conference, an Indian journalist came up to me and was really, kind of like go home, he said. Not that politely. And one of my colleagues who actually worked for the England team came up and like pushed him. I think he thought he was going to hit me. He wasn't. He was just giving it a bit. And he pushed him, and there was a melee. There was kind of a. Anyway,
there was a
no one
contest with
reported it.
journalists as well as players.
Well, it was, yeah, but it was just, I guess, this is what happens at the end of long tours, and people get upset, and then, you know, everyone's had a bit too much of the same company.
Right.
But yeah, it was just funny. You know, these things, people take them terribly seriously in the moment. In the long term, they don't matter at all.
All right. So just a little about India's batting. You know, England's always had a very good plan, and they've, you know, also worked on it or operated very well in England. Does England have a very good? I mean, what is England's plan to bowl to Virat in India? Having said that, the other part is that now people don't see just Virat as the main wrecker in chief for India's batting. You talked about Ajinkya Rahane at number 5, and he could still make a large difference. Yeah. Walk us through a little about what are the plans and how does?
Oh, who knows? I mean, look, I don't know what the individual plans will be, but I can tell you, as a general, the seamers will have to move the ball laterally. You've got to find some movement, and you would have to say that Rohit, for example, might well fiddle for the ball outside off stump if it moves away. So that is, of course. Listen, he is a terrific player. So when I say it's a weakness, you know, I mean, relatively, you've got to search for it. Equally, Pujara, throughout his career, gets bowled sometimes by the one that comes back a little
back
bit.
in.
It happens. So you wouldn't have to be a genius to think they're going to look for those. But both times you've got to get the ball moving. Now, one of the things that England have improved at, there's a couple of things. One, if it moves, they've got a very skillful attack. 2, they're very good at bowling the wobble seam now. The wobble seam to David Warner. I mean, David Warner obviously had that terrible tour to England. He didn't do anything wrong. There are times when batting in England is impossibly difficult. So the wobble seam, it's angled in. The bowler doesn't know which way it's going. You know, he's got to play it. Some of them nip away. Some of them go straight on. It is tough. So I don't suppose they'll get a lot. I mean, who knows in India? Because we've seen conditions where, before your guys' time, but Ian Botham took 13 or 14 wickets in the match. Was it 13 in Mumbai? Where the ball, it was in Mumbai, wasn't it? In about 1980. Yeah. And he scored 100 as well. But I mean, the point was that he took 13 wickets as a swing bowler in conditions which were sort of perfect, that he and Kapil Dev would have loved. You wouldn't think that would happen, but it is India. And, you know, anything could happen because the conditions can vary hugely. But the thing that they'll do is, apart from all those sorts of skills, they've also got quite good cutters. And I'm sure that, say, to Virat, they will try and get him reaching, and they might have a relatively short extra cover or a short mid-off or something like that. And they'll try and get him reaching. They'll try and get the ball to move away a little bit later, and they'll try and beat him that way. You know, these things are very difficult. But ultimately, they're going to have to, there'll be times, won't there? There'll be sessions or days when they are required to play on the batsman's patience. And that is still a big part of Test cricket in India, I think. I think it will be. And then, you know, your tiny skills. There were days in Sri Lanka, Gaul in the first Test even, ball did nothing really. It did almost nothing. So you just got to be mean. And you've got to wait for the batsman to be, you know, and if you are trying to get Pujara to lose patience, I mean, Lord, sort of like trying to outstare the moon. It's desperately tough. So, but that's what they'll try and do. And that's why it's difficult for them to think of playing less than 3 seamers. Oh, and I think they might try the short ball attack occasionally.
I was going to ask that. I know this is no Australia, but do you think that's also in the plans?
Yeah, definitely, it will be. I mean, they've got probably 3 people who could do it well now. Broad can still do it, but, you know, I wouldn't, it's not his game particularly anymore. He's a very changed bowler. I mean, you know, he's a wise man. He's lost a bit of pace and found other skills. It's incredible. But, you know, Wood, Stokes and Archer can do that. And I've seen them all do it quite effectively. Stokes is an extraordinary cricketer because he is used in so many different roles. And I saw him bounce out Sri Lanka in Colombo on a wicket which was slow.
Oh, he
And
can do
it
anything.
yeah, I mean, he can sort of do that anywhere. So he might be asked to do that. I think Wood will probably play one or two of these tests, and he will no doubt be asked to do that. I always think it's a bit of a, if you see Jofra doing that, you know it's plan B. I thought it was really interesting. Curtly Ambrose has been interviewed recently for the job of bowling coach with England. And
Interesting.
I don't think you'll get it, but I did think that he would have been. I'd kind of like him and Jofra to talk a lot, because I thought Ambrose bowled just a lovely length, didn't he? Ambrose obviously had a bouncer, but he didn't bowl his bouncer that much. And I think Jofra overdoes his, and I think he's a bit better than that. I think he could be the complete fast bowler. He's obviously still learning. There's a huge amount of ability there. And I'd like him to bowl that fuller sort of top of off stump length most of the day. And Joe Root sometimes tends to use him in bursts where he says, give us a burst of bouncers. And I don't know. I think that sort of sells him a bit short, really. I think he's better than that. And also, I think most of India's batsmen, I mean, the days when they used to get bounced out, it's the 70s. It just
Not anymore.
You really would be surprised if it became a major issue this series, wouldn't you?
Especially after what happened in Australia this year.
Do you know what I mean? So, and Australia's attack is so good at doing it, in Australia in particular. So, yeah, I mean, that's the worry, that I'm not sure that England have a lot that Australia don't. I thought that Hazelwood-Cummins partnership is just so strong. Maybe they wore them down. Maybe they shouldn't have played them in all the tests. I mean, they still look good.
Stark and Lyon under contributed, maybe.
Well, they're different, maybe, but Stark, you sort of know what you're going to get. You're going to get, he's a bit more mercurial. But Hazelwood and Cummins they're so consistent, aren't they? Seem to be able to keep bowling good pace, really great errors all day. Maybe England will do something different in that they'll freshen their attack up between games. I don't know. And also, they're slightly different. They're not as quick. They're not as tall, generally, anyway. And they maybe have a couple of different skills. Don't know. We'll see. There'll be more cutters. You didn't see that much of that from Hazelwood, did you, or Cummins?
Not really.
Not much.
So now, before we end, gentlemen, last question of the of this episode, calling the series. So probably I'll go around. I'll start with you, Sumer. What's your prediction on the scoreline?
Spot right
Yes.
away. I think it'll be. I think 3-1 to
3-1.
India.
Okay. Which one are you thinking we are going to lose?
Well, I'm just like trying to, average it out. One test, I think England will win or should win.
Okay.
I'm not sure which one.
How about you, Sai?
I think 2-1, and their best chance is the day-night test.
Yeah, I thought so too. Shivam?
I don't know. I am going a bit left field. Just suddenly I had a gut feeling 2-2.
2-2?
Yeah. I don't know why.
Throw him out.
Vivek, how about you?
For me, I think it's going to be 3-1 with one test, which we lose would be the day-night one. Yeah. After that 36 all-out, anything could happen, right?
Yeah.
How about you, George? And
Really
what are you going to bet this time?
Really interesting that none of you. I don't think there were many draws in there. Very few draws in there.
Yeah.
Because I just remember this. There
I think
was
Sai.
six test series in 81-82. I think it was 1-0.
Wow.
Which shows you how the game has changed. But these wickets could be flat. Yeah, they could be really, really flat. And
those are unplayed wickets also, George.
Yeah,
They could be fresh.
they could.
Also,
They could.
I think India is a little more confident of their own bowling now. So probably more competitive wickets.
So, George, how are you? Call the series.
I hope they go with a bit more interesting wickets. Not interesting. That's too pejorative a word. But I hope they go with fiery, pacey. I don't know. I hope they go with wickets which favour the bowlers. One, because it's more entertaining, I think, And 2, I think it will let England into the series. Because I think if they play it on really flat wickets like the last series was, I only see India winning. So, bearing in mind, I have to do one of these shortly with Joe Root. I mean, when does this go out?
Tomorrow.
No, look, I'm doing polite inquiries with Joe Root tomorrow as a favour. Yeah, I can't sit here and say, I can't sit here and say, Joe, if I was you, I would pretend I've got a headache and go home early because I mean, predictions, as I've shown previously when I've come on, are for idiots. What do I know? All I would say is genuinely, hand on heart, if England won this series, it would be the biggest achievement I've seen them ever pull off in Test cricket. That's how strong favourites I make India. I think India are very, very close to the complete Test team at the moment, playing in their own backyard. I'm pleasantly surprised to hear you guys say that England can win a Test. And I think if they do, they haven't had a bad tour, to be honest. Got to be realistic. But they will be much more positive and have much more fight than me. I don't have the mentality of a sports person. So all I'm going to say is India are the strongest of favourites. But there is something quite nice and a bit tougher than you would think about that England team. And they do keep surprising me. They've won 5 in a row in Sri Lanka. Yeah. Amazing.
Sure.
With that, I take that if England win this time around, it'll be better than 2005 series at least, if not better than India versus Australia. And we look forward to having you. Maybe so. Obviously, we can't have you in India this time around, but probably next tour we'll have you. And that beer is still pending, if not the firstborn.
It is. I owe you beers, don't I? Do I have to give you my firstborn child?
No. You seem more interested in that.
Because she's very nice, but she's just buying her first house right now, and I think she has got plans to stay in England. And I didn't break this to her. Strictly speaking, legally, I was probably on dubious ground. I'll make an extra round of beers. How about that?
Sounds good.
Maybe a round of Old Monk rum. I remember that quite.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to say quite fondly. I'm not sure that's the word. I think I can still taste it.
After how many years?
I don't know, but it was Anand Vasu who introduced me to that, bless him. And I quite enjoyed it, but it did give me a headache. So the next day, I felt like I had quite an angry man with quite a blunt spoon trying to chip his way out of my head. I remember that quite clearly.
So, thank you so much, George, for doing this to us, and probably we'll have you soon. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure.
I check it like you read Singh bowling it, yeah? I really don't mind.
You hit me once, I hit you back.
He's bowling like my Auntie Annie when she'd had too much sherry to drink.
Played over my head, then I set fire.
मैंने कहा बेटा बेटा होता है और बाप बाप होता है.